Hey everyone, Connie here, and welcome to something that's honestly been a long time coming, my top 10 favorite Love, Death, and Robots episodes. This is something that I said I was going to do after I did the reaction to the entire series of Love, Death, and Robots for the Spring Has Sprung special. And I kept saying I was going to get to it and get to it, but the weeks passed and I just never was able to. I never got around to it. Now, initially, I was going to do it a clip show like I normally do for top 10s and redirect it to BitChute or Google Photos or both and just have the clips showing my favorite entries. But instead, I have chosen to actually talk about it. Since I'm specifically counting down favorite episodes here and because I don't want to take the time, honestly, to go and try to find the clips I need for every single one of these episodes, I'm going to talk about each of them. I'm going to go through them one by one and discuss them. So, that being said, we're just going to get this started right away. So first up is our number 10 slot, which is episode 11 of the series, Helping Hand. This episode was kind of shocking to me. It was shocking, it was surprising, it was not really what I expected. So what we have is this female astronaut. She's up there working on a space station or her ship or whatnot, and she ends up getting knocked away from it. She gets thrown off course, and the only way to get back is to at first throw her glove to use the momentum to push herself back towards the ship, but then she has to take off her hand to do so. And we see after she removes the glove and stuff, we see her arm starting to crack and freeze and stuff due to the lack of oxygen in space. And the way she pulls off her arm and shit is like so fucking grody. It's so disgusting, but in a good way. It's really fascinating and exciting to see how far she has to go to survive. And she had given up for a good while there. So to see her tear off her own arm like that, it almost feels triumphant in a way. And I think that's what really made this one stand out to me. It really felt like she accomplishes something. So that really, really did it for me. Number 9 is episode 16, Ice Age. So this one was probably the most unique one of all of them. Like all of these stories, all of the episodes in Love, Death, and Robots were very unique. But this one was especially so because it actually had a live action cast. We had Topher Grace and some other actress, I don't know her name offhand, portraying a live action couple who just moved into a new home. They check out the freezer that came with the home, and inside is a straight up civilization. And the civilization, from their perspective, moves really fucking quickly. They watch it go from like the Bronze Age to all the way to like the future. They see these wars play out, and from the perspective of the civilization in the fridge or in the freezer, it's happening at a very slow rate. It's like normal amount of time, but from their perspective, looking down on it, it's like going super, super fast. So all in the course of basically one night, they see this entire civilization go from like the Bronze Age or something like that is when it starts, all the way to like a super hyper futuristic civilization, and even eventually the collapse of the civilization and destruction of it altogether. It's a really fascinating, interesting concept, and I really like how they did it. Number 8 is episode 12, Fish Night. This was the most cartoony in its design, but it was done for a purpose. So we have these two guys driving through the desert when their car breaks down. One of them tells the other this story about basically how the ocean, how the desert used to be an ocean and all, and wondering about if like the ghosts of fish are still around. And that night, the spirits of these fish come out there. The one guy who you see in this picture ends up becoming enamored by it, and he strips himself naked and swims into the air, basically in a way, entering the spirit realm of these fish and ends up getting killed by one. It's a really fascinating, beautiful episode. The visual design of it all is gorgeous. The glowing that the fish, well, the luminescence of the fish is just so phenomenally done. It comes across as something that is both beautiful and dangerous at the same time. And it's like, it's just so cool. It's just really cool and fascinating. The characters are also pretty likable. Like, you can't help but understand why this guy would do what he did. Um, you completely get it. But at the same time, you still, as a viewer, understand, no, that's probably not a good idea. Um, moving on, though, we have our number 7 spot goes to episode 13, Lucky 13. Lucky 13 was an episode that at the very beginning I didn't think I was going to like, but I ended up loving by the end. So this new pilot ends up getting assigned to this ship called Lucky 13. Lucky 13 is a ship that has survived countless hostile encounters. And while the ship has survived, though, every member of the crew always dies. Always. But the ship always has survived. And so she's assigned to it because she's the new pilot. And she ends up forming a bond with it. Not like in a kind of like living ship kind of way, but she forms a bond with it, and like she ends up piloting it for a long time because she connects with it. She connects with its just the energy it seems to expend. And it ends up working. She ends up protecting her crews, and they go on all these different hostile missions and stuff, and it kind of works out. But eventually the ship does end up losing its final battle and has to blow up. It's actually a pretty emotional story. Our main character, who you see here, is a likable character who you kind of really get behind. And by the end, it's like it actually kind of brings you to tears almost, because it gets really emotional and you really connect with the character and her connection with Lucky 13. Our 6th place entry, though, is episode 10, Shapeshifters. So Shapeshifters is a werewolf story. We have these military soldiers who are known werewolves. Like, everyone knows they're werewolves. It's not a secret or anything. They're kind of being put into this military group as a secret weapon of sorts. We specifically focus on 2 friends who seem to have a really just fun relationship with each other. One of them ends up getting transferred to another camp, and eventually that camp gets attacked. Our main character, the one we really focus on, goes there and finds his friend dead, as well as everyone else, and puts together that it must have been another werewolf. So they go into this village, try to find the werewolf, don't find him, but that night, the guy goes off on his own, and he had realized while in the village that one of the people there was the werewolf, but he didn't see anything, because he wanted to get revenge on his own. So he and this other guy fight, and he does end up winning. But through it all, he decides to leave the military, to just abandon them straight up. Because, honestly, the military treats him like an animal. It treats him like shit. And treats all werewolves like shit. And at this point, he's just decided he's had enough of it. And he's not going to handle it anymore. It's a really fascinating take on werewolves. I've seen many werewolf stories, and usually not anywhere they're like so normalized like this. So it's really fascinating, really interesting, and the graphics, the CG on it is phenomenal, especially during transformation sequences. In our number 5 spot is episode 14, Zima Blue. This one, I didn't know what I was going to think about at first either. But it was just so artistic. And I mean, that was kind of the point, but it was so, like, successful at portraying that. So Zima Blue is about this reporter who is doing a story on this world, universe famous artist, basically. Um, so according to her sources and all, Zima Blue was this guy who was a famous artist who basically just kept trying to build things bigger and better and do the most extravagant art pieces possible. And eventually he started putting in these small blue squares into his art, a very specific shade every time. And eventually the blue overtook the art to where it was all about the color. We end up finding out, though, that he was never human. Because according to her sources and her stories, he was a human who basically became a cyborg and gained immortality. We find out that he was actually a robot the entire time and actually started as a simple pool cleaning robot. A very simple, basic one who was basically given freedom and started to improve upon himself piece by piece until he became what he is now. And his final art piece, as we see, has him basically destroying himself and returning to that simplicity of cleaning the sides of a pool, the tiles of which are the color of Zima Blue. And it's beautiful. It's a really gorgeous, beautiful, artistic episode. And honestly, if it weren't for the episodes that I liked a little better than this would have easily been a possible number one. But there were episodes that I just enjoyed a little more. It was so fucking good, though. It was so fucking good. It was so, again, beautiful. And it just really wowed me when I saw it. Number 4, though, is episode 4, Suits. This one was really just cool. So we have this group of farmers who build these mech suits to be able to fight against an oncoming army of alien insects. And we see throughout the throughout the episode that that's what they're doing. They're fighting them off. They're attacking them. They're defending against them. And one guy even gives his life to save the others. And in the end, even though they have a lot of troubles, they do end up defending their farm plots against them. But that's when we find out the truth. These farmers are on a planet that looks a lot like Saturn, in these small, like, force-fielded bubbles. And the alien bug creatures are, I guess, the natural inhabitant hostile aliens of that planet. And they're just trying to break through and feed. It's a really fascinating story when you get to the end of it. The action is great. The characters are excellent. Like this, out of all of these shorts, this one probably has some of the best characters by far. They are so likable and relatable. Like you can connect with them on a personality level. This guy you see here is kind of our main character. He's the one we follow the most. We see his wife as well and their friends. And it's just a really fun, exciting story. Number 3 is episode 2, 3 Robots. This one is by far the most fun episode of this series, and definitely the funniest. So this one focuses on 3 futuristic, completely personality-driven robots in an apocalyptic future. So these robots have complete autonomy. They're completely their own people, basically. And they're just going around the ruins of, well, the Earth, and discussing with each other about what each of these things that they find did and what they were for. The world is apocalyptic. It has been completely destroyed, wiped of humanity. And by the end, we find out that the cats who have grown to become like experimented on and stuff are actually hyper intelligent and can speak. And it ends in a really fascinating way. But the real draw of this episode is definitely the comedy and the camaraderie between the three robots. They are just so funny. Like everything they do, everything they talk about. You see two of them here. The taller one is kind of neurotic, while the shorter one's kind of a wise ass. There's also a third one who's more of like a box kind of robot, kind of like similar, you could say, to R2D2 or the robot from Space Dandy. Actually, would be a great example. Um, she's just this long box, but she's adorable as fuck. She's hilarious and adorable. And it's like they're really just fun, likable characters. And it stands out amongst all the other episodes of the series because none of the other episodes really have this kind of tone to it, where it's a very both dark and comical tone. It's dark in the fact that this is a post-apocalyptic world where humanity has been completely wiped out. But it's also really funny in, again, the way the robots are interacting. It takes more of a comedic approach to it in a way. And the things that they're talking about with like what things were for humans is really fun. Like they really get creative with it. But then we get into our runner-up. Number 2 is episode 1, Sonys Edge, the one that started it all. This was the episode that made me decide to react to the entirety of Love, Death, and Robots. When I had first heard about this series, I wasn't like super like hyped about it or anything. I just kind of heard vaguely about it, and it's like, I'll check it out, I guess. And this episode sold me right away. So we have this woman named Sunny who has been abused and raped and all kinds of horrible shit by the men in her life. She goes with 2 friends to this fighting competition, and we find out it's not normal fighting, but that she's actually using a psychic link with a giant monster. And she uses that monster, and she has that monster fight with another. The actual monster fight part is epic. It is probably one of the best monster fights I've seen. And that's including stuff like Godzilla. It is just so freaking epic. Just the way they move, the things they do, the intensity of the situation and scene, it's great. But I think what really sells this episode is Sunny herself. Not just because she's this character who has been abused and raped and shit. It's not just because she's like a victim character. It's because of her strength through it all. She's come back from being such a victim and has become strong because of it. She hasn't let it get her down. She hasn't let it destroy her life. She's instead chosen to have it fuel her for the future and make her just all the better. We also see this one girl in it who's working for, you could say, the bad guy. And she's hot, I'll be honest. There's this girl, she's like this cutesy blonde girl who at first seems really innocent and nice and everything. And there's a scene where it gets pretty steamy in this episode. It gets like really sexual, like the blonde girl, her tits are straight up out and like very visible. And she's making out with Sunny and all, and it's like getting really steamy, and then all of a sudden it pulls a fast one, and this blonde girl, has Wolverine claws, and she just snicks them, to use the Wolverine comic book term, right into Sunny's jaw and right up through her head. And then the guy who was running the entire event, who wanted Sunny to take a fall, which she refused, comes in and, along with the blonde, kills her. But then it's revealed that that was just a cyborg body shell, and that the real Sunny is somewhere else, and ends up controlling the mind of the monster to murder both the girl and the guy in a very brutal fashion. And it's it's so fascinating that it's like nothing I've seen before. The monster fight is so exciting and exhilarating and thrilling. The the sexual scene between Sonny and the blonde girl is really fucking sexy. And then the scene after where the blonde girl betrays Sonny and then eventually Sonny ends up killing them both is really like shocking from both accounts, from both the initial betrayal against Sonny and then Sonny's reveal and the murder of them. It does everything right, and it's paced well too. It never feels like it goes too fast. It never feels like it's over too quickly. It just feels right. Like this was a self-contained story that fit within its time limit. And that's what made me so interested in the show. But there is one episode that I do like more, and that is episode 8, Good Hunting, my number one spot. Good Hunting is gorgeous. It is exceedingly well written. It has exceedingly likable characters mixed with great East Asian mythology. And on top of all of that, it has the most sympathetic story in all of this series. So we have this young kid who's hunting with his father. They're hunting this beautiful woman who is actually a fox goddess in disguise. They run after her, they chase after her and all, and end up finding the temple where she lives. And we find that she has a cub with her, a baby. Well, more of a young child, but still. Around the same age as the main character, the boy. The mother ends up being killed, but the boy hides from his father the fact that there is a child, that there is a young one. Later on in life, the two end up connecting and becoming friends. However, the boy ends up leaving and moving out of his small Chinese town to the big city. He begins seeing the rise of technology, seeing the rise of this very steampunk cybernetic kind of technology. It's very futuristic, but also steampunk at the same time, and it's awesome. It's a really cool way to do that. He ends up coming across the fox girl, though. She's in a human form and basically whoring herself out on the streets of the city because she doesn't really have anything else left. She doesn't have anything else to do, any other way to make it work, because her magic is fading. One day, she does end up whoring herself out to this bigwig who isn't really interested in her. He only gets off to machines. And so he kind of forces her, he drugs her, I believe, and forces a cybernetic surgery onto her, basically turning her into a straight-up robot. But still with the same mind and heart and everything. Now, the guy who, the boy who had grown up, the Chinese boy who had grown up with her and everything and become friends with her, feels sorry about what happened and basically agrees to help her. So he helps, like, he had become exceedingly great at technology, so he helps improve her robotics and everything, even to the point of allowing her to transform her body into that of a fox form, since she can't do that with her natural magic anymore since it's faded. And because of this, she is able to go out hunting down the scum and the terrors of the big city, basically in order to get revenge. That is what this story boils down to. In the end, it is a revenge story against the people who have wronged her, against the people who have wronged everyone. And it comes across as this really just fascinating, I say that word a lot in here, and it fits with all of these episodes, though. But it comes across as this fascinating, really sympathetic story. Like, you really sympathize with this girl from what she's going through. You really understand why she wants revenge, and you understand why this guy is so willing to help her. Their bond works, and you actually end up shipping them, even though their like relationship is never really canonized or touched on from a romantic sense. You do end up really seeing that kind of thing in them. It's like it almost doesn't need to be said. It's there. Um, and when he ends up helping her in order to allow her to go hunting, it feels so, again, triumphant and really just like it was properly built up to and properly deserved. It feels like a point that the episode was working towards. More so than any others, it just feels just so much right by the end. It feels just right in the way it's handled, the way it's written, the way the characters are handled, and you just really fall in love with it. But those are my top 10 favorite episodes of Love, Death, and Robots. Tell me your list down in the comments below, or at least what were some of your favorites and what were some of your least favorites. Tell me your thoughts, and thank you so much for tuning in. For now, I'm Connie, and I'm signing off. See y'all next time.